The game may not go down as a memorable one in the history of West Virginia basketball, but the achievement of WVU men's team's head coach certainly will. Bob Huggins ties Jim Calhoun. 920 now, 20 career wins now for Bob Huggins. Mountaineers, though, dominate Penn 92-58, kind of as you would expect. First Ivy League matchup, though, for WVU since the early 80s. So again, the Mountaineers win it big. They remain undefeated, and Bob Huggins hits a milestone now with 920 wins, as he now has some legends to look up to, and certainly within reach, to say the least. Ethan Bock joining us here, our men's basketball beat writer, as he is at the Coliseum and got to absorb it all, including Eric Stevenson's really, really hot night. So, Ethan, first off, you're just off of the press conferences. I do want to ask you, what did Huggins say about tying Jim Calhoun, who he's also friends with, at 920? I imagine he underplayed it and talked about the game, and I did see some of the quotes that he still is not satisfied with how this team played despite the big win. But what did Huggins say about the achievement, about 920 wins, tying Jim Calhoun? I mean, that's big stuff, even though it may not mean that much to Huggins right now in the midst of his career still.
Yeah, actually, nobody asked him about that because I think
Wow.
everybody knows. I think
Okay.
everybody knows what the answer is going to be.
Right.
Say the last calendar year or so, he's been passing many
Yeah.
coaches after getting 900 wins. And it's always been the same answer. He underplays it.
Yeah.
It's not a
So
big deal to him.
I I knew right when
Yeah,
I was asking it there. I figured maybe it got asked, but
yeah,
okay,
nope.
yeah. Coach K and Jim Boeheim is who he's trailing right now, and Coach K obviously the Final Four is the national titles. Jim Boeheim only having the one ring thanks to Carmelo Anthony, but all the wins 999 for Jimmy B, and Coach K, who's retired now, at well over 1,202, I believe. So Huggins within grasp of getting 1K there, and maybe Jim Boeheim. I don't know about Coach K or if he wants to do it that long. But since he downplayed his achievement, we'll talk about the game that Huggins wants to talk about, that Huggins not satisfied with despite another big win for his team. They cover a spread again, if you care about that. Or they almost covered yet another spread. They did cover this spread, but they missed it last game just by one. But regardless, 92-58. So this has been a team that's been covering spreads, been winning big, 18-25, the quick math of whatever this score gives you. And you would think that would make Bob Huggins happy and would be a positive. Granted, they've not yet been really tested. They're supposed to win these games, and the major win being against Pitt. We've seen Pitt not nearly as good as even that Vegas line would have said. They've lost the VCU, so that likely takes away from the win for West Virginia. But what was then the vibe from the players and Huggins after this victory? Eric Stevenson red hot. This team won big. I know you said it on Twitter. They've offensively been better than many would expect, and they've really been shooting the lights out, which I don't know anyone really expect that either. But missed layups, mental mistakes, they're still there. They're rebounding better, though. But Huggins not satisfied. So why is he not satisfied? And kind of paint the picture of this victory for anyone who didn't watch this game on how you see a box score where West Virginia wins really big. Yet again, their better players are having great nights. Again, Eric Stevenson was perfect from the field for a while, and the team shoots over 50%. But it's not really viewed as a great win by the head coach. Why?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors why Hugs isn't satisfied with the win. Obviously, he's happy they won, but
Right.
there's always going to be something he wants his team to improve on long term. Um, he brought up rebounding. Penn actually out rebounded West Virginia tonight. It's probably the first time
Wow.
I've questioned the rebounding of the team. I thought the
Yeah.
first week of the season they were much improved, but tonight just proved that maybe there'll be some struggles rebounding the ball. Penn also had like 11 offensive rebounds, so that was a big stat that was brought up. Also, Huggins wished that they took more advantage of the transition plays, 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s. There was a lot of missed opportunities on the fast break where
Yeah.
they would turn over the ball or miss a shot. So Huggins, that's another thing Huggins wants to fix by the time they get to Portland next week.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the players themselves actually brought something up that nobody's thought about. There hasn't been a team yet that West Virginia's had to punch back. Like there's no team that's
I did
gone
see
on
that
a run.
comment. Yeah.
Pitt, the closest thing was Pitt's first 4 minutes where they hit 4 threes,
Yeah.
and then West Virginia routed them the rest of the way. But there's no back and forth runs yet between West Virginia and their opposition.
No, and they haven't really been tested. That's just fair, and I'm glad the team's realizing it as well, because that's factual. Whether you want to root for the team or analyze the team, that's just true. But yeah, and maybe that's part of why there are mental lapses. We saw the other night where they're missing layups, kind of laughing about it, and then Huggins pulls Eric Stevenson aside, and clearly he wasn't excited. I know you actually turned to me and said you actually were surprised that Huggins just didn't take out the whole starting five, kind of to send a message that, hey, this isn't just a pickup game on the street, even though we're up by a lot here. So maybe they got the message sent to them, but maybe not, because again, they win big, but you do see in these games this year that there are portions of the game where the vibe is they know they win this. Outside of quitting, they have this game won. So they do kind of take the pedal off the metal a little bit there. And obviously against Kansas, against Texas, against Baylor, against Texas Tech, those teams in conference, even before Gonzaga, Auburn, Xavier, it's not going to work. You're going to be tested. They're going to get tested this year. Ethan Bock at the Coliseum. He is our basketball beat writer. The basketball team wins at 92-58 as the Mountaineers now 4-0 remain undefeated. But again, they've yet to be tested. And Bob Huggins will keep telling you that, and we've touched on that in different pieces of our coverage on WV Sports Now. I am Mike Asti, and this is our first of these this year. We'll try to do more post-game show for the basketball team, obviously do them for football, and different things got in the way to be able to do one yet for basketball, but this worked out. And Huggins ties Jim Calhoun at 920. So now third all-time in wins. That's big. The team's winning big. But the one other point that I heard Huggins say in one of his mid-game interviews, and this again goes to a question about Eric Stevenson being so red hot, and Huggins actually flipped it. And this is what Huggins always does. He's never going to be fully satisfied, even though I'm sure secretly he's telling the kid it's a good game. But he said, yeah, but why every time he shoots the lights out can't he play defense? So is that something you notice, that maybe this team is better offensively than anyone would have expected, certainly shooting-wise, certainly the veterans are really carrying maybe more of the load than anyone would expect. And Perez is not yet on the floor for this team. He's certainly supposed to bring a shooting touch. And Trey Mitchell's somebody that Huggins has said 6 weeks from surgery, he's not at his best, but 21 the other night. He certainly can provide an offensive touch. But with all of that said, are they getting lax defensively while they focus on offense? And will that eventually rear its ugly head?
Yeah, I could definitely see the team once they play a Power Five talent like Purdue, Gonzaga. I definitely can see their offenses taking advantage of West Virginia playing sluggish. There are times where West Virginia has looked kind of almost asleep. I don't know if it's just because of the opponents they've played in the first 4 games or what, but it seems like at some points their energy level just isn't always there.
Yeah.
But the difference between last year's team and this year's team is this year's team at least has that 1 or 2 moments of energy from either Muhammad Wagi or Joe Toussaint, where they're diving on the floor, they're getting an offensive rebound they shouldn't be getting.
Yeah.
They're creating extra possessions. So there are many players on this team, like I said, Toussaint, Wagi, even Josiah Harris, James Okongwu, young guys off the bench. There are much more guys on this team that can produce energy that last year's team just didn't have.
They have depth, to say the very, very least. Yeah, they have depth. And honestly, watching last year's team and how bad that was, and I know that they won early and then it just completely went in the toilet. It almost feels like, while they probably would have still won these games, maybe they would have been closer. And it would have gave fans more concern and more pause during those moments of mental lapses. There would have been more of them. I think the opponents would have been able to score more. I don't think West Virginia would have scored as much. So, yeah, the depth is a major deal. And this is a team mixed with some legit vets, 50-year seniors that have either been at WVU or elsewhere and have certainly played a lot of basketball. And then also a lot of young inexperience that hasn't been around and that are new to West Virginia and Bob Huggins and that culture is only going to continue too. Again, Perez will join, and he'll be new to Huggins outside of all the phone calls that you talked about in one of the articles for us at WV Sports Now with Huggins recruiting. So they've been on the phone once Perez finally answered all of Huggins' calls. But in terms of playing, it's going to be new, and not everyone can play for Huggins. So it does appear, and I want to see if you agree with this point, because this is what somebody actually said to me when I did a live chat show earlier today, and I actually fully agree with this, that one of the major differences as well, outside of depth and they're just playing better, is that last year's team versus this year's team feels like they truly like playing for Bob Huggins and fit what Huggins does and don't mind him basically criticizing every moment that they live, regardless of how good or bad it is, more than last year's team. Meaning last year's team didn't feel like as much a Huggins guys, which he kind of noticed at the end of the year with some of his comments of maybe they don't fit, we need to retool, and if you don't feel like you should play for me, I'll let you get out of here and help you transfer, to paraphrase. So is that at all something that maybe you think is legit, that this is a team more of Huggins guys, that they're not going to worry about him basically being really, really tough on them, and maybe they relish it, and it's actually going to be why this team maybe is better off?
Yeah, I would agree. Eric Stevenson brought it up post game tonight that they have the reason why they're so good this to start off the year is that they have unselfish guys. Many guys that have played high level basketball in the Power Five level,
Yeah.
4-year seniors, 5th-year seniors. They don't care about scoring. They just want to win at this point in their careers. So Huggins and his coaching staff and transfer portal brought in 4 guys in the offseason that all played for tough coaches that yell. Fran McCaffrey at Iowa, Chris Beard at Texas. Eric Stevenson was coached by Frank Martin and Greg Marshall. So,
yeah,
all of those guys have gotten yelled at in their
I'm
careers.
sure Frank also told him, hey, Huggins is going to yell more than me. So if you thought I was yelling a lot, get ready. And obviously he knew a little bit as well, but
yeah, these guys aren't like affected by Coach Huggins yelling at them. They understand why he's yelling at them. They get it. They understand it. That's why they're Bob Huggins players, despite only recording a few games with him so far. They are Bob Huggins guys.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for that. I mean, he has 920 wins, obviously, multiple Final Fours, Elite 16, Elite Eights, conference title appearances, all the success in the world, Basketball Hall of Famer, and it's legit, but not everyone can play for Bob Huggins. We've seen that. That might be the whole Oscar Tshiebwe thing. I don't know if maybe that would have worked out as well with Bob Huggins. That personality doesn't work with everybody, and he does usually get the most out of his guys, but if you're not a Bob Huggins guy and the fit doesn't seem to be there, then it's just not going to work out, and there's really no, because he's not going to change. He did adapt to get into the portal some, and it certainly has added to the depth of this team, and you can really see that on a quick turnaround from how bad it was last year, and this team even again could get better with the sky being the limit here. But outside of that, his personality is not going to change. Stevenson 21, Johnson 11, Mitchell 11. Again, Mitchell 6 weeks from surgery, and then Toussaint 11. So that's 4 players in double digits in scoring again. I don't think we saw that too many times last year at all. So that's big in terms of depth offensively. You're laughing because, it was really bad.
It would just be Tad Sherman.
Right.
Tad Sherman would have double figures, and then it'd be everybody else.
Pretty much, yeah. And his double figures very rarely was over 20. So you imagine the final scores then. That's why they didn't win that many games. You're already getting that in most of these games this year. Now, looking at the rest of this West Virginia schedule here in terms of what's coming up, because I know we were talking the other day, and you had mentioned that while West Virginia has not been tested, and they certainly are winning, and they're winning bigger than you, myself, many others thought they would. I even think Bob Huggins is probably surprised by these final scores, even though certainly the mental mistakes, the missed layups, and now in this game, the rebounding problem that wasn't an issue and seemingly thought was fixed in the first 3. Again, they're 4-0. They're winning big. It's hard to be too mad, but they're going to now get tested, even though there are still some issues. Purdue, Xavier, then you kind of get a dip there. Obviously, the tournament coming up in Portland, prior to all of this. But you mentioned the Purdue game being where that first loss could arise, I guess, outside of tournament play. What are your thoughts now going into the tournament, going into this upcoming schedule when you're going to see those out-of-conference games, Purdue and Xavier? where have your opinions changed about what West Virginia can do in this upcoming tougher stretch that will be their first test of the season versus maybe what you thought was going to happen prior to the season from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit it's just the first 4 games, but I'm very surprised just how West Virginia has played offensively and defensively this season. I think it's just because of how poorly they played last season.
Maybe.
Um, and just on paper, the offense just did not look like it was going to improve that much through the transfer portal. But so far, I've been wrong. Um, I think going into Portland, they can win 2 games. They could beat Purdue first round and then lose to Gonzaga, but then beat either Xavier, Florida, Portland State, whoever. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could see them winning 2 games in Portland. It's obviously in the transfer portal era at the beginning of the season. Like you don't know who's going to win at all. I mean, there's Oklahoma State and Oklahoma have already lost in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Kansas almost lost to Southern Utah tonight. So you never know what's going to happen
Yeah.
between any team that plays. So, but I think just
Baylor loses even to a ranked team, but Baylor does lose.
yeah, Baylor lost to Virginia. So it's unpredictable in November and December now with the transfer portal era. But I think just off of instinct, I'm going to say they go 2-1, either beating Purdue or losing to Purdue and then beating a couple teams in a losers bracket. But I think they come back to Morgantown from Portland with a 2-1 record,
which would be a positive in all reality, especially with what's in front of them. And eventually, obviously, you get into conference play, and then you should have Perez at least at that point. You did say, though, the Purdue game likely is that first loss at really maybe the best case scenario. Why? Why is Purdue such? And then I'm going to get to Gonzaga here and then round things out. But why is Purdue a team that you think is going to beat West Virginia as well as WVU's playing right now, and as much as everyone's really vulnerable in the country?
Yeah, I have Purdue as the first loss just because 2 reasons. Number one, 7'4" Zach Edey. He's one of the best players in the country. He's got his size. If West Virginia doesn't rebound, they're screwed. I mean, he's gonna if they don't box him out and rebound, he's gonna record
Yeah.
20 points and 10 rebounds.
Yeah.
Second reason would be Matt Painter and how he develops guys. He has many players that surround Edey that played last year under behind Jaden Ivey, behind Edey even, and now those guys are stepping up, playing significant minutes, and I mean, Matt Painter's still got a team that he'll develop 4-year guys, so that's another reason why I could see West Virginia losing is just off of they're going to play a team that's more accustomed to playing with each other. These guys are all from these 9 new players that Huggins and his coaching staff just added are all from different programs. Regardless if they want to say the team chemistry is good or not, it's going to be the 5th game of the year and they're playing up against a top Big Ten program in Purdue. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be easy by any means. Now, granted, I guess the counter to that, if you want to have a glass half full take, they rebounded well in every game except for tonight. So maybe this should be more of the aberration. But Huggins did talk about that I think that's also why it annoys him so much. A lot of the things that they're still having issues in, layups, reboundings now, defense, that haven't really mattered on the scoreboard because they're still winning big, are things that Huggins said also in one of his interviews. We worked on rebounding for an hour just yesterday. We worked on guard play and our guards being better defenders for an hour yesterday. We worked on this, and this, and then just none of it's happening in the game. So it almost feels like their talent alone, because they are the more talented team on the floor in all 4 of these games, is enough to win and apparently win big because they have developed chemistry very quickly. But I think to your point, the Purdue matchup, certainly Gonzaga, certainly Xavier, that might be the first time that talent will not be enough, and they might not have the best player on that floor, nor the most talented group. So they may actually need to execute the things that they're working on in practice that apparently are not getting executed in the game. Before we do close up shop here on our first post-game show, and again, after this one, the Mountaineers do win it 92-58. The headline, though, Bob Huggins, 920 wins, tying Jim Calhoun now for 3rd all time. And it will be a while until we have to talk about another man that Huggins is passing and more career achievements there, unless it happens in a tournament run. But that Gonzaga matchup that everyone assumes is going to occur and assumes will be a loss for West Virginia, are they in a way a little more vulnerable? And is it a bit too cart before the horse to assume West Virginia would lose to Gonzaga based on what we've seen from Zaga this year? Because obviously they're always a dominant team. They lose to Texas. They should have lost to Michigan State. There's only a few games that have been played, and they could actually have lost half of them. Is there a chance that if West Virginia cleans up rebounding, they don't miss layups, they play like they've been playing against inferior opponents these first 4 games, they actually could beat Gonzaga? What would be a percentage chance, say, for them to beat Gonzaga? If already a Big 12 rival has done it, why can't the Mountaineers?
Yeah, I don't see why West Virginia couldn't beat Gonzaga. Am I saying they're going to? No. I think if they play today, Gonzaga wins. But this is the first time in a while I can think of where Gonzaga actually looks vulnerable.
Yeah.
They almost lose to Michigan State. They lose to Texas. Every non-conference schedule they have, they usually play well regardless of who they're playing. They'll play all these great Power 5 programs and then go into
because they know to get a
play.
number 1 seed in the tournament, they need those wins. They need to look good in those games. And right now they've gone 1-1 and they have not looked impressive at all. They could easily have lost both.
Yeah, they're gonna have to boost their resume in this Phil Knight Invitational, and if they don't, they'll still make the tournament. Obviously, they'll get the auto bid. They're one of the top teams in the country.
But
they're
gonna win the
I mean, there's going to be arguments in March if they lose, especially to West Virginia. If they lose, there's going to be arguments in March about what their seed line is going to be. So this is next week's a big week for Gonzaga. They're going to come out hungry.
Yeah, and they're going to be a de facto home team, in all reality, certainly against West Virginia in terms of the fan base, in terms of who probably will travel to that game. You are going to be there, though, so that'll be a positive for us. We will have coverage there from that tournament and potentially post-game shows. Granted, I will not be there, so I will be dealing with my baby in the East Coast time zone, so we'll see what we can do in that respect. We will have coverage at WV Sports Now. Also follow Ethan, and of course, at WV Sports Now when he is at that tournament, and then the rest of the schedule, the rest of the season, we'll both be on it. And obviously, a lot more tests are to come. Maybe that first test of the year, really. You could also look at it half empty and maybe be negative. I'm sure some fans are going to be thinking, yeah, Gonzaga's vulnerable. West Virginia's looked a lot better, but it also probably means Gonzaga right now is being told by Mark Few and company, we need to dominate if we play West Virginia, hypothetically. Like, if we're playing West Virginia, we need a beatdown win. Which means maybe they're extra motivated. Maybe they want to run through this tournament and just knock everybody off and get 10-plus point wins. And maybe you might see the best of Gonzaga this season rather than maybe the worst, which Michigan State and Texas have seen this year. So maybe West Virginia's catching Gonzaga at a bad time in that matchup. But nonetheless, Bob Huggins has 920 wins. He's third all time. The team's 4-0. They're undefeated. They're winning big. They're beating spreads. Yeah, there's a lot to work on. Yeah, there's a reason why Huggins is not satisfied. But the win and loss margin is the most important thing, because if you want to really know what's going on in a wild college basketball season right now that I think is still under the radar because we're still in the midst of football season, go to John Rothstein's Twitter and he will tell you which teams have lost buy-in games on a nightly basis. There's at least 3 or 4 of them that are major programs that are perennially in the tournament that are losing to teams that they're getting money to go play, and they're actually getting victories. So that hasn't happened in West Virginia yet. And Morehead State was a team that been in the tournament recently against WVU, so it certainly could have been, but they're still winning, and they're still winning big. Ethan, I'm going to let you get going in the empty Coliseum right now. The Mountaineers do win it. We'll be talking to you one of these, I'm sure, soon, and you'll be at all these games coming up, including the tournament. So again, our Ethan Bock there live from the Coliseum. The Mountaineers win it big. Bob Huggins, once again, climbing the all-time wins ladder, although he's probably going to be kind of, neutral for a while as they stack wins, but a long way to go to get to Jim Boeheim or Coach K. But 120 wins now for Bob Huggins. The Mountaineers undefeated 4-0. They're winning big, but Huggins is not satisfied. And how well are they really playing? We're going to find out all of this and get all answers here in their games coming up.